Okay, Dandavat Pranams. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana-shalakaya Chakshurmritanjena Tasmai Śrī-Guruve Namaha. Gurubhishta Supurakam Guruganera Shisha Sambhushitam Chincha Chincha Samastaveda Nipunam Shirupa Pantanugam Govinda Vidamujvalam Bharatanam Bhaktam Vitam Sundaram Vande Vishwa Guruncha Divya Bhagavad Premno Hibijapradam Devam Divyatanam Suchanda Varanam Valarka Chilanshitam Sanjananda Puram Sadeka Varanam Vairagya Vidyam Buddham Shri Siddhanta Nidam Subhakti Lasitam Saraswatanam Vadam Vande Tam Shubhadam Madeka Sharanam Yashishwaram Śrīdharam Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratrise Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sudhe Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Jai Shri Gurudev. So today is the divine disappearance day of our Padam Gurudev Om Vishnu Pad Srila Bhakti Rakṣak Śrīdhar Dev-Goswāmī Mahārāj. Dandavat Yatida. Happy to be joined. Dandavat all the Vaishnavas. So very important day for us, very important day for anyone aspiring to be a member of this glorious mission, Śrī-chaitanya-mahāpremon, which does not just constitute, buildings or people, but it exists within its ideal. It exists within the high aspiration of our Guru Varga, and particularly Srila Bhakti Rakṣak Śrīdhar Dev-Goswāmī Mahārāj, coming in the line of his Guru Mahārāj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the faithful Rupa Nuga Vaishnavas, the line of Sri Rupa Goswami and Śrī-chaitanya-mahāprabhu, and of course our beloved Gurudev, Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Mahārāj, a beloved disciple, friend, and successor of Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj. And this is a day of profound gratitude, right? It is a day when we are reflecting upon all the wealth that we have received, right? In a way, we can think actually we've been given purpose for living. The wealth, the aspiration, which is what it really is, that has been given to us by our gurus, is so high and so hopeful. And that gives us something that makes our lives really worth living, gives something for us to truly strive towards. And so today I was thinking, of course, what, as our Gurudev has said, it is the glories of Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj are unlimited. And, but we, of course, are very unfit. We are very limited. What can we say? Our Gurudev, he commented about one article that he wrote about Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, saying, I'm trying to say something in glorification, but I can make instead of a deity, I can make a monkey. He said very humbly something like that. Of course, not true in his case, but in our case it is. And so I'm feeling today to honor this one composition that our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, composed himself, because it is something our Gurudev, he cautioned us about, that, we have to be careful in how we go to give glorification, because what is our capacity? It is like if a kindergarten student goes to write some praise of someone who's, beyond PhD level, what they intend to be praised, it could actually be, somewhat condescending or even insulting, because what capacity do they even have to appreciate, what this is? That is one thing our Gurudev has cautioned us about. He in particular, we heard from Yudamanyu Prabhu, Yudamanyu Seva Vikram, that our Gurudev, he told him, and it was actually I believe it was for the appearance festival of Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj. Yudamanyu Prabhu was going to lead that program in California. And as he was leaving India, our Gurudev cautioned him, you cannot give a certificate to Guru Mahārāj. And so Yudamanyu was quite puzzled about that, how, what can I say? What can I say? Srila Govinda Maharaj has told me I cannot give a certificate to Guru Maharaj, saying like I cannot glorify him. So what will I do then? How do I get around this? And then Yudamanyu Prabhu had this inspiration that he can, in a very careful way, he can glorify Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj by sharing the glorification of others, those who actually are qualified, right? By looking through the lens, right? By looking through the lens of those who have qualification, then we can come to appreciate something. And our Gurudev, he himself humbly expressed once that, I was a young boy and I was living so close with Guru Maharaj, so what was my capacity to understand who he was? I was living so close with him, helping him in so many daily things, so what capacity do I have? I'm seeing him in a human way, right? So what capacity do I have to really appreciate who he was? Our Gurudev, sometimes he would say, I was like an insect living close to Guru Maharaj for 42 years. Of course, again, his humility. But then he expressed, but when I saw the honor that came from these great exalted Vaishnavas, leading preachers in the Gaudiya Math, powerful, big preachers, they would come and honor Guru Maharaj so highly. Because, one thing that's interesting to consider, right, is that Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj, he was such an exalted personality, in this particular era post the departure of Srila Saraswati Thakur, and he was so highly revered by his godbrothers. But he wasn't living like funnily enough, with the most followers, and our Gurudev, one reason for that our Gurudev mentioned is because Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj was so strict, and very simple. Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj lived, their ashram, this is like going back, 1940s, 1950s, West Bengal, and the mat was very, very poor, very small. Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj was extremely strict. There would be just a few brahmacharis who would be staying at any given time and giving support. But then Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj had godbrothers who had, many temples. He had one godbrother who opened dozens of temples, like 60 something temples across India. I believe even more than Saraswati Thakur had established. Like, he had powerful, there was Bhakti Sranga Goswāmī Maharaj, there was Madhav Maharaj, there was Keshav Maharaj, and others, very powerful preachers. They were bringing in crowds, opening temples all over India, continuing the legacy of Srila Saraswati Thakur, had wealth, had resources, followers, and so on. And so it was quite an interesting contrast. They had these huge followings and temples and so on. But then they would come and give they would defer to Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj, right? And they would come and give this very high honor to Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj. There was one, and so our Gurudev commented that, by seeing their appreciation, these big, powerful preachers coming with their groups of disciples and seeing them, bow their head to Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj and honor him so highly, sleep on the floor by his feet. Madhav Maharaj, he would do that when he visited a torn mattress at the feet of Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj, and he insisted on doing that. Then our Gurudev said that gave him this new level of appreciation for who Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj was. And really, they gave so much honor. And there was one famous occasion many of you have heard of, Bhakti Saranga Goswami Maharaj. They used to have this special meeting at our mat in Navadvip after the Gaur Purnima, Vishva Vaishnava Raja Sabha, it was called. It was something I believe originally started by Jiva Goswami, when leading preachers of Mahaprabhu's line would gather together, share reports, take advice from one another, give encouragement, and so on. So this was going on, and it was continuing at our mat. So that also gives you some indicator of the place that Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj had in the Gaudiya group. So there was this one occasion, this meeting was being held in our mat, and Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj would give Goswami Maharaj, Bhakti Saranga Goswami, the position of president. And this one year, Goswami Maharaj, he made this comment, he used this phrase, Simhavalokan, which means the glance of a lion. And he used this very nice analogy, saying how lions, they're these powerful, mighty creatures. They're striding ahead, right, across the plains. But every now and again, they're glancing behind. They're taking a look behind, assessing the terrain that they've crossed, making sure they're on track. And so he said, similarly, we are all these lion-like creatures, but every now and again, we are looking to Śrīdhar Maharaj. We want to know that Śrīdhar Maharaj is pleased with us. So he made this beautiful expression. So anyhow, so today I wanted, in line with that, right? That we want to appreciate through the lens of those who have the capacity to truly appreciate. I wanted to read through this one composition that our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, wrote in honor of, dedicated to his beloved Guru Maharaj, called Praṇati Daśakam. These 10 prayers of glorification to Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj. So I wanted to go, extraordinarily beautiful. It was composed by Srila Govinda Maharaj very shortly. I mean, it must have been like a few weeks after Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj departed from the world, right? That was 12th of August, 1988. 12th of August, 1988, Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj left. And our Gurudev, he also wrote Shri Guru Arti Stuti, right? Very soon, I believe a few days after Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj left. That's the Arati song that we sing to Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj. And then he also composed this Praṇati Daśakam, which is in following, conventional Sanskrit style of poetic composition. And it's a Daśakam, right? 10 verses. So this Srila Govinda Maharaj composed very shortly after Param Guru Maharaj left. And he offered it on the day of Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's appearance, Vyasa Puja, that same year. So that was just like 2 months later, October 1988. And our Gurudev also included this on Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's Samadhi. So for those who have been to our Navadvip temple, you'll have seen, right, and inscribed around the walls of this really extraordinarily beautiful marble temple, which our Gurudev commented it, it was a manifestation, right? He didn't make any architectural plans. Our Gurudev didn't plan it like that, but every day it was revealing itself, right? And he said, every day he would go out and there would be workers there. And our Gurudev, we've heard from eyewitnesses, from Madhusudana Maharaj and others, our Gurudev would be out with his cane drawing in the earth. That was how he didn't have now we have AI generated architectural plans and so on, very precise and accurate. Our Gurudev's literally using his cane to draw in the soil and conveying to the workers his vision of what this beautiful temple would be. And so day by day, this was how the temple was manifest. And our Gurudev also had the inspiration to inscribe the favorite verses and compositions of Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj around this temple. And he also included some of his own compositions that were in glorification, specifically in glorification of Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj. So that is a wonderful wealth that we have. And we're fortunate Sadhu Priya Prabhu made a book. It's an ebook. Maybe one day it will be published in a physical form. But he made this ebook, Sri Samadhi Mandir Stotramala, so which is including presenting all of these verses with translations. So I'm reading from that. And I've also shared the text in the description to this live stream and also on Facebook and the WhatsApp group we have. So if you want to follow along, you're welcome to do that. Jai Shri Gurudev. So Praṇati Daśakam, 10 prayers in glorification of Śrīla Bhakti Rakṣak Śrīdhar Dev-Goswāmī Maharaj, composed by Śrīla Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev-Goswāmī Maharaj. Verse 1. Naumi śrī-gurupādābjaṁ yati-rājeshwareshwaram śrī-bhaktirakṣakam śrīla-śrīdhara-svāminaṁ sada. Translation. I eternally offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my most worshipful divine master, the supreme emperor of the sannyasi kings, Śrīla Bhaktirakṣak Śrīdhar Swami. And, we can also remember, right, that our Gurudev is writing this in a mood of separation, right, because his Guru Maharaj has just left, right? And so in the absence of his Guru Maharaj, there's this venting, right, this venting of divine emotion, feelings of separation and appreciation, and so much. And so, Saraswati Thakur, he wrote this very interesting commentary explaining, speaking about the nature of vipralamba, of separation, and saying that vipralamba, separation, is the natural state. Viraha is the natural state of the soul. And he also, this is actually in reference to Madhavendra Puri, he's discussing. And Saraswati Thakur, he explains that it is in separation that one's devotion comes to light, and that it is with this like pressing feeling of separation that the soul is driven to express this outpouring of service energy, right? It's as if, that there's this desire, in this intense feeling of separation, there's this desire to connect, right? And how can one connect? Through service, through sacrifice, right? And so we saw this demonstrated very much in the person of our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, that after Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's departure, of course, he was already so deeply absorbed in seva, but there was this like intensification of service mood and service energy and offering. And so he, he's making all these compositions. He's preparing the Samadhi temple and so many other things. And so he's writing this composition, very much. And we cannot, we can hardly imagine, what our Gurudev is feeling. This is, he would have been writing this, could be days, not less than weeks after Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's departure from this world. And so in this first verse of this composition, he's glorifying Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj as his beloved divine master. And he uses this phrase, and it's also used in Guru Arti Stuti, right? The Arti song that Srila Govinda Maharaj also composes. Yati Rajeshwareshwaram. Yati, or Jati, if you're saying with a Bengali pronunciation. This is referring to a renunciate, a sannyasi. And so Gurudev is referring to Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj as Raja, the king, Rajeshwareshwaram. He's the king of the kings, something like that, of the sannyasis. The emperor, he's in the translation, the word emperor has been used. The emperor of the master of the sannyasi kings, something like that. It's, high praise. And this was really true, actually. It's not just, poetic expression. When Gurudev was talking about this point once, and he referred to Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj as a king maker, right? He said he did not want to be a king, but actually his position was higher than that. He was a king maker, because after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left the world, the Gaudiya Math fell apart. There was, so much fracturing of his glorious grand mission. And so there was, there were many disciples, sincere and leading disciples, who were at a loss. What are we to do? And many of them turned to Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj at that time. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had indicated Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj's position as he was leaving the world, right, by requesting him to sing this song, Shri Rupa Manjari Pada, which is like the sacred anthem of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So Saraswati Thakur specifically and repeatedly requested that only Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj would sing this song in this assembly 24 hours before he left the world. And many could recognize that Saraswati Thakur was making a clear indication that the lineage will continue through Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj, right? The Rupa Nuga Dada, that divine current coming from Mahaprabhu through Srila Rupa Goswāmī, that will be continued through Srila Bhakti-rakṣak Śrīdhar Dev-Goswāmī Mahārāj. And so naturally, after Saraswati Thakur left, and there were all kinds of dramatic things that took place, and fracturing, sometimes not so pretty to see, it was natural that many turned to Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj. And Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj actually went into something of hiding, right? He wanted to live in seclusion. He had been a great preacher, right? In the Gaudiya Math, he traveled all over India. But after the departure of Guru Maharaj, and also seeing the breakup of his Guru Maharaj's mission, it was Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj's desire to live in solitude. My Dandavat, happy to have all the Vaishnavas joining our live stream today. So he wanted to live in seclusion, and after much prayer and meditation, he settled on staying in Navadvip. But he was also somewhat in hiding. He didn't inform his godbrothers about where he was, and there were a number who were searching for him, and finally they found him in this small little hut in Navadvip, on the banks of the Ganges. And they've requested him, you please start a new mission. We will serve under you. We'll support you. We want you to be the leader of our mission. But it really was not Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj's desire. And so what he did was he told them, I will give my backing to all of you. I will support all of you to start your own mission. So you become gurus, you take disciples, and you will have my backing. Right? He also gave sannyas to many of his godbrothers. Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj, his nature was very simple, right? Very not ostentatious at all. He called himself a back-pushing man, right? He liked to stay in the background. And of course, Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj is, quite widely known and revered throughout the different missions of the branches of the Gaudiya Math. But I don't think many know like how much his influence is even now, right? For example, what you see now in Mayapur, right? For those of you who have been to Mayapur, like that whole arrangement was the vision of Śrīla-śrīdhara Mahārāj. Previously, Mayapur was actually like a dangerous place. It was like, there was like a lot of dense forest. It was a place where many, gundas, gangster type folks, they would roam there. It was the kind of place where you'd have to worry about getting your things stolen. And of course that probably still goes on now. But it was not at all what you see today. It was as I said, like a dense forest, and a little dangerous. And And it was Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's vision. Of course, Saraswati Thakur had established his Chaitanya Mat, so that was there. And then, of course, Yoga Pit had been established initially by Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and that was continued by Saraswati Thakur. Of course, there was something going on there, but it was kind of wild. It was kind of like the Wild West, right? So it was Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's vision that all of the prominent disciples of Srila Saraswati Thakur would have their own mission. They would have their own mission in Mayapur, like because the Chaitanya Mat, this was the mother Mat, the Mula Mat, the mother mission of all the 64 Gaudiya Mats established by Saraswati Thakur. It's also the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it was such a key, such a crucial place for all Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And then there's special significance for the disciples and followers of Saraswati Thakur. And so it was Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's vision that the prominent disciples and preachers in Saraswati Thakur's mission should all have their own place there. And Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj actually personally got involved and spoke to many of these godbrothers. In some cases, he even bought the land for them, gave it to them, and then they paid him back. This includes Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, that Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj pushed him to have his own mission there. Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj had so much appreciation for the service he was doing, preaching in the West. And Swami Maharaj actually had trouble, Prabhupada had trouble establishing his mission because of some envy from certain persons. And so in the end, Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj insisted. Swami Maharaj Prabhupada was like, I don't know, this is too difficult. I don't want to push into this environment. But Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj insisted. He sent Srila Govinda Maharaj. Srila Govinda Maharaj helped him purchase land there. I believe originally in his own name, it could be, but he definitely was very much involved in the purchase of that land, the original plot of land. So that what you see today in Mayapur, all these grand temples, including the huge ISKCON Chandranoi Mandir, that was all the divine vision of Srila Bhakti Rakṣak Śrīdhar Dev-Goswāmī Maharaj. And so anyhow, going back to what we were discussing, in this period after Saraswati Thakur left, all these godbrothers come to Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj asking him to become the leader of a new mission. Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj said, no, but I will back you. I will empower you in a sense to start your own missions, and you take disciples and carry this forward. And so our Gurudev, because of that, he referred to Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj as a kingmaker. There's a king, but then a kingmaker, we can say, is even higher position than a king. And so this phrase here, Jatirajeshwareshwaram, this is very perfectly capturing all of that. He's the emperor among the kings of the renunciates, the sannyasis. Very wonderful phrase. So we'll go on to verses 2, 3, and 4. Tridaṇḍa-tulasīmālā gopīchandana-bhūṣitam achintya-pratibhā-snigdhaṁ divyajñāna-prabhākaram vedādi-sarvaśāstrānāṁ sāmañjasya-vidhāyakam gauḍīyāchārya-ratnānām ujvalam ratna-kaustubham śrī-chaitanya-mahāpremon matalinam shiromanim. Verses 2 to 4 in the translation. He possesses a lofty, dignified, divinely effulgent, incomparable, holy form, so charming to behold. Adorned with gopīchandana and a necklace of tulasi beads, he holds the triple staff of the Vaishnava ascetics. Although he possesses the qualification of inconceivable potency, he is full of the utmost affection. All the 10 directions are illuminated by the effulgence of his super-mundane, unalloyed perception. He is the dispenser of the genuine, proper, harmonious adjustment of all the scriptures, the Vedas, the Vedanta, the Upanishads, the Puranas, etc., headed by the Srimad Bhagavat Purana, Srimad Bhagavatam, which holds equal importance with the Vedas. In the necklace of the jewels of acharyas and the Sri Gaudiya Sampradaya, he shines resplendently like the brilliant Kaustuba gem. And he is radiant in his glory as the crown jewel of the bumblebee devotees who are mad in the Supreme Lord, Śrī-Chaitanya-Mahaprabhu's love supreme. I eternally offer my obeisances unto him, my most worshipful divine master. So beautiful. Dandavat pranams here. Irish God family have also joined. Happy to see you all here on this special day. Our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, he explained once that, there are certain conventions when it comes to Sanskrit composition. And one thing he said, when you're going to write a pranam, something in glorification of the Lord or an exalted Vaishnava and so on, one point he mentioned is that it is traditional to write something describing these 4 particular points: Nama, Rupa, Guna, Lila, right? So Nama means the holy name, Rupa means the holy form, Guna is the qualities, the divine characteristics and qualities of that great soul, and then Lila is their divine pastimes and activities. And so we see our Gurudev, he is following this in this composition here. So the first verse, of course, he's describing his nama, his name, and then the next verse he's describing his rupa, his divine form, lofty, dignified, divinely effulgent, incomparable, holy form, so charming to behold. And really that was the case. Of course, I did not have the privilege of meeting Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj in person, but he did have this very beautiful spiritual form, and lofty is the word, sudīrgha, I believe is the Sanskrit here, tall. He was very tall, like 6 feet something, which especially for Bengali, is quite unusual. It's quite a sight. Bengalis are generally a little on the short side. But so Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj was more prominent because of that. You could say he was quite tall by any standards. And I used to clean. I used to have the privilege of cleaning, and still sometimes when I go to our temple in Navadvip, we clean Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's quarters, and his cane is there. And I remember from the beginning when I would go in to clean there, I was always impressed by how big his cane was. He was very, very tall, very imposing, grand figure. And we heard from Madhusudan Maharaj, that he once got to witness Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj dancing in kirtan on Gaur Purnima Day. And that was quite an extraordinary sight, his beautiful, tall figure gracefully dancing. Our Gurudev actually mentioned, surprisingly, that Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj was a very good dancer. I remember once when Gurudev mentioned India, Sridhar Shabafur was there, and he was saying how struck he was by that. And as I think we all were, we weren't expecting that. Our Gurudev said, he was not such a good singer, but he was a very good dancer. So Śrīdhar Maharaj had all these different dimensions to his nature and personality. Adorned with gopīchandana, tilak, and tulasi beads. And although he possesses qualification of inconceivable potency, he is full of the utmost affection. And this was something very wonderful in Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's nature, right? That although he was so exalted from any perspective, whether just from a perspective of, intelligence, brilliance, but then also his spiritual qualifications, he was an extraordinary personality. So although he was so highly qualified, he had this simplicity about him at the same time. He had a very loving and affectionate nature. Of course, we also hear how he could be very strict, but he was also very loving, very merciful. And many of the Westerners who went to meet his divine grace in the 80s, they experienced that. And our Gurudev, once he was talking about this too, and he was actually speaking about Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's horoscope. There's a recording of this. And he was speaking about these different aspects of his horoscope and speaking about this point, right? How he had, despite his brilliance, his spiritual, intellectual, philosophical brilliance at any level, he also had this simplicity. And even he said to the point that one of his godbrothers, Ananta Vasudev, he was very famous in the Gaudiya Math, and he was so brilliant. He was seen as like one of the right hands of Saraswati Thakur, Ananta Vasudev, and then Kunja Babu. Kunja Babu was the big manager of the Gaudiya Math, and then Ananta Vasudev, he was like the brilliant Siddhantic scholar, and very widely known in the Gaudiya Math, very high position. And so naturally, he was good friends with Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj because they were both so inclined towards the Siddhanta. They were both so brilliant. So naturally, they had a friendship and a mutual appreciation. But Ananta Vasudev, we heard sometimes he would actually become a little unhappy with Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj because Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj, they were friends. But then Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj, he didn't hold himself. He didn't take airs around him. He didn't hold airs around himself. He had this simplicity. He would mix with everyone, and including newcomers. He was very accessible, and he was friendly with even junior persons. And so Ananta Vasudev, we hear he had made some comment like, "You are my friend. Why are you like hanging out with these junior persons? You're my friend. Like, you have some special status. You have some special dignified, elevated status. So how is it that you're associating with these junior people?" He didn't like it. So he had that. Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj had that simplicity about him, and this very affectionate nature. And he is the dispenser of the genuine, proper, harmonious adjustment of all the scriptures. This was Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's, one of his great qualities, right? That he did not have a narrow view on what these teachings are, but he mentioned once himself that he says, when I'm going to speak on something, I'm considering what has been said on this subject by my gurus, by the Shastra, by my Guru Maharaj, by other great Gaudiya Acharyas and Vaishnavas, what is said in the scripture. I'm considering all of these things, right? I'm not just saying something from one isolated standpoint, from one isolated view. Oh, it says this here, or this person said that, or my guru said that. There's a tendency for us to be like that. This is the way it is. But Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj, he had this, not just vast understanding and knowledge, but he also had this extraordinary ability to extract the essence of all of that, right? Dandavat pranams, Hari Priya, happy you're with us. And we, he could like churn out the essence of all the scriptural conclusions, and could present evidence, scriptural evidence to support those conclusions. And we hear of many different occasions, Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj, he also had this capacity for debate, that he was brilliant, but he was also very expert in debate, in philosophical debate. And so we hear of many occasions when different pundits, different scholars would come to him to discuss their various views and philosophical scriptural conclusions. And Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj would debate with them. And our Gurudev also mentioned Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj had a very gentle style. He was gentlemanly in his style. And he said, Saraswati Thakur's style was little more, you could say, uncompromising, right? A little strong. And our Gurudev said, in some of the disciples of Saraswati Thakur, they would copy that style and would have this kind of heaviness in their style of preaching. But on the other hand, Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's style was always gentle and gentlemanly. And that also was appreciated by those he would debate with. And we hear they would happily be defeated by him. And there are so many occasions of this we've heard of, our Gurudev has mentioned, but our meeting will go on for many hours if we go into all of these stories. So maybe we'll move on. But yes, he had this special ability, and even maybe just one example we can mention, even Saraswati Thakur, we hear, would sometimes call for Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj. If he was having some discussion with someone and was unable to establish his point, he would call for Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj, because Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj had this ability also to understand the mentality of the person he was speaking with, and to present his point in a way that they could understand, right? And we hear on these recordings, we're so blessed to have these recordings from the 80s of Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj speaking with the Westerners, and you hear how he's always like very sincerely trying to make sure that the inquirers, the inquiring devotees, have understood what he's saying, right? Many times you hear him say, "Do you understand?" He's not just, there can be this tendency, right, just to say something for the sake of saying something, or just to say it as it is and then take it or leave it, or just expecting them to get it. But Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj, there's this very personal aspect of his discussions where he's like checking in with the person he's speaking to. Do you understand what I'm saying? And sometimes like so patiently, to the point where you're like feeling a little pained about it. He's so patiently going through and explaining again and again until the person he's speaking to understands. We can hear that in the recordings. Okay, so I'm gonna go on to verses 5 and 6 here. Gāyatry-artha-viniryāsaṁ, gītā-gūḍhārtha-gauravam, stotraratnādi-samṛddhaṁ, prapanna-jīvanāmṛtam, apūrvagrantha-sambhāraṁ, bhaktanam hṛd-rasāyanam, kripāya-yena dattam tam, nomi kāruṇya-sundaram. Translation. And this is an expanded translation. By his grace, he brought to full bloom the deepest underlying purport of Gayatri, the mother of the Vedas. And, there's, as we said, right, there's endless things we can say in praise of Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj. But there are some there, we can also make a list of some of the particularly outstanding and unique contributions that he made, right? This is something important when we are appreciating our lineage as a whole, right? And this is what makes the difference from being a cult follower to being like an actual follower, and appreciating the significance of what you're following in an authentic way, rather than just following like sheep, right? That, that we want to understand what is the unique wealth that has been given to us by it. Why is it that we are worshiping this person? Just because we want somebody to worship, because we want to put somebody on the chair, that's idol worship. That's actually what idol worship is. Are we idol worshipers? What does Śrī Chaitanya-Saraswati actually stand for? We all need to be asking ourselves these questions. And so, like, what is our Guru Parampara? Is it just a lineage of bodies, right? There's Diksha Guru Parampara and there's Shiksha Guru Parampara, right? There's the Diksha line of initiation to initiation, but then there's the substantial line. What is the Shiksha, the unique Shiksha that's been contributed, the unique teachings that have been contributed by this Vaishnava? That's what we need to look at. And so Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj, he has offered such unique wealth to the lineage of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Rupa Goswami. And so one of those points is that he gave, and our Gurudev is mentioning that here in verse 5 of his Praṇati Daśakam. He has drawn out the inner meaning of Gayatri, right? You know, what the Gayatri mantra, and this is referring to the Brahma Gayatri mantra, very famous mantra of Vedic India, famous and celebrated mantra. So what is actually so special about this mantra? Why is it so important? What is its real inner meaning? This was revealed by Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj, had not been revealed before. And Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj drew out the meaning, considering different points from scripture. He drew out that the real conclusion and inner meaning of Gayatri brings us to Radha Dasyam, the service of Srimati Radharani. And this explanation is, was recorded and it's published. If anyone wants to look it up, you can find in Subjective Evolution of Consciousness, I believe there's one chapter. He also wrote his own Sanskrit composition, which is a little more difficult to find. It was published in the first edition of Bhagavad Gita that came from our Mat. But it wasn't included in the newer edition, I think, to make the book shorter. And that actually, I should try to find that and share that, because we don't want that to get lost. So Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj also wrote his own Sanskrit composition, showing this meaning, drawing out this meaning from the Gayatri mantra. So this is one very important and unique gift that has come from Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj and has not come before. So by his grace, he brought to full bloom the deepest underlying purport of Gayatri, the mother of the Vedas. By his grace, he opened the hidden treasure house of the glorious internal purport of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And he distributed these gifts to one and all, even the lowest of the low. So he also gave unique insight and profound insight into different verses of Bhagavad Gita, particularly the Chatur Shloki, the 4 principal verses of Gita in chapter 10, but also several other verses, I believe chapter 9. So Śrīdhar Maharaj gave some significant explanations of these verses, which had not been clearly revealed before. So that is another important and unique contribution. He distributed these gifts to one and all, even the lowest of the low. I mean, that is really true. And even some of the godbrothers of Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj, they were concerned about this and cautioned him, like, some of these explanations are very high and they can be abused by some. Do you really think it's a good idea to share it? But it was Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's feeling that it has to come out, it has to be given. And it's really the responsibility of the audience to sincerely receive and apply those explanations, that he gave more importance to the necessity to reveal and share truth, right, rather than to conceal it out of caution. So as Gurudev says, even the lowest of the low, even those unworthy to receive it, he gave it to them. He revealed the supreme holy book, Shri prapanna-jīvanāmṛtam, and I have a copy right here. Again, something unique, very profound, this book. It was a book that was appreciated by many of the godbrothers of Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj, who were very, so qualified themselves, including Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada. We hear when he was crossing the Atlantic Ocean, he was carrying a copy of Prapanna-jīvanāmṛtam for his personal nourishment, along with Chaitanya Charitamrita he was reading, and he was carrying the Bhagavatams also for distribution. It was also Prabhupada's sister who, on the request of Prabhupada, sponsored the first publication of Prapanna-jīvanāmṛtam. So that shows even further what his regard was for this this book. And other godbrothers, Keshav Maharaj, I believe, Tirtha Maharaj, they all express profound appreciation for this prapanna-jīvanāmṛta. It is a reservoir of wealth on the teachings of Sharanagati, collected throughout the scriptures, and which is actually more difficult than we may understand nowadays. When he's doing this, it was in the 40s. He's doing this 1941. He was working on this book, and he didn't have Google, he didn't have any digital archive, database, or all these things. He's Krishna search, and he's literally from memory or from old manuscripts and libraries, collecting these verses, and then organizing them so beautifully, systematically, and then also giving his own unique original illuminations, drawing out the essence of each of these verses. The first chapter is also all his own original compositions, and then at the conclusion there's also his own original verses. So it is really an extraordinary book. First book and last book our Gurudev mentioned. It is for the beginner. It is also the nourishment of those who are already enlightened in divine love. Let's see where we were. So he revealed the supreme holy book, Shri Prapanna-Jīvanāmṛta. He revealed the supreme holy book sung by the Lord and his devotees. He revealed an unprecedented collection of holy books, and in parentheses is listed some of the books that came from the talks of Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj, like Search of Shri Krishna, and so on, that are the very life nectar for the devotees' hearts and spiritual senses. He gave these gifts to the world. I eternally offer my obeisances unto him, my most worshipful divine master, the beautiful deity of mercy incarnate. Deity of mercy incarnate. Very beautiful expression. kāruṇya-sundaram. Kāruṇya is mercy, right? Sundaram, beauty. And this is perhaps a hidden reference to one of Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's verses. This is an extraordinary, that's another thing which we haven't really talked about, how extraordinary Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's compositions were, and anything that came out of his holy mouth was so poetic, actually. But Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj has this one beautiful verse. It's the second verse in the introductory chapter. Upakramamritam, Gaura-Vigraham Vande, Gaurangam, Gaura-Vaibhavam, Gaura-saṅkīrttana-mahārāsarasabdheś, Gaura-kṛṣṇaṁ. Very beautiful verse. It's a glorification of Saraswati Thakur, but it's also on another level a glorification of Mahaprabhu and his divine message. There's this kind of play on words here, because Saraswati Thakur, in a sense, he is Gaura-Vag Vigraha. He is like the embodiment of the divine message of Mahaprabhu. So Gaura-Vag Vigraham Vande, I offer my obeisance to the personification of the divine message of Gaura, Shri Gaura. Gaurangam, he is an extension of Gaura, or you can also say golden form, right? Like Gaura. Gaura-Vaibhavam, he is the wealth or an extension of Shri Gaura. Gaura-saṅkīrttana-mahārātam, he is maddened in the divine kirtan, saṅkirtan of Shri Gaura. And then the last phrase, which I believe our Gurudev is drawing upon, gaura-kṛṣṇaṁ, same expression, kāruṇya-sundaram. He is the beauty of the mercy of Shri Gaura. And so Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj is saying that here in glorification of Saraswati Thakur. Our Gurudev is saying that here in glorification of Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj. Very beautiful phrase. Naomi kāruṇya-sundaram. We'll go on to verse 7 here. saṅkīrttana-mahārāsarasabdheś chandramanibam sambhati vitanan vishve gaura-kṛṣṇaṁ ganai saha. He revels in his full-blown splendor, as along with and through his intimate servitors, he distributes in the entire universe the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Gaura-kṛṣṇa, the moon risen from the nectar ocean of the grand dance of the congregational chanting of Shri Krishna's holy name. And, you know, Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj, he did not physically leave Navadvip himself in those last years, but the world came to him. and he himself chuckled about this, you know, saying the mountain did not come to Muhammad, no, if Muhammad could not go to the mountain came to Muhammad, right? There was this expression, Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj quoted that, like, you know, because actually his Guru Maharaj, Saraswati Thakur, he could see Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj's quality, and requested him to travel to the West, right? He requested Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj to travel to London. But Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj did not feel he was the appropriate person for that, so he humbly declined. But then in his later years, you know, the world came to him. And so he was pleased in that he was able to fulfill that service, right? And so Westerners from every, you know, not just Westerners, but sincere seekers from all over the world, they all came flocking to Navadvip to hear his divine sound after the departure of Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada. Were all, you know, enraptured by his divine words, took shelter of him. And then there were many who went back and then opened centers in his name, under the auspices of our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, as desired by Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj. And so in this way, Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj's message spread far and wide, although he did not actually leave his seat. And his talks translated into dozens and dozens of different languages. Perhaps, I think it might be like over 100 different languages. So many publications all over the world coming from the talks of Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj. And to this day, you know, so many are nourished, taking shelter of this divine katha coming from Śrīla-śrīdhara, divine stream of Hari Katha. And then we also have to mention our Gurudev, right? He was a very active part of that whole movement that took place. And that was also our Gurudev's vision in spreading the mission. You know, he once was talking about this, you know, we heard from Madhusudana Maharaj, one day in Kolkata, he mentioned, you know, my Guru Maharaj didn't want me to open so many mats. He didn't want me to open so many temples. So why have I done that, right? And he said, only because in each of those centers, the message and the glories of Guru Maharaj will be discussed and will be known, will be made known. And so that was very much Srila Govinda Maharaj's inspiration and vision behind spreading the mission of Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Maharaj around the world for the service and glorification of his beloved Guru Maharaj. And in fact, he inaugurated his world tours during the centenary year of Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj, right? That was 92, I believe, the first world tour. And our, you know, we can also note here, Srila Govinda Maharaj waited. Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj left in 88. There were so many invitations that came from around the world calling Srila Govinda Maharaj to come. But Srila Govinda Maharaj was very cautious about jumping into all of that. And he wanted to wait until he was sure it was the right moment. And he also wanted to settle things in India. And finally, he decided to begin his world tours to the West on the occasion of the centenary year of Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj. And so Srila Govinda Maharaj beginning his travels around the world was very much an offering for his beloved Guru Maharaj. You know, there was no hint of his own ego in that. But that was an offering for the glory of Guru Maharaj and his mission and his message. And so in this way, Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj's message has spread all over the world. And it was also our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, who pushed Śrīla-śrīdhara Maharaj to give shelter to these Westerners who were coming for nourishment. We'll go on to verses 8 and 10. Dhamanishi Navadvipe Gupta Govardhane Shubhe Vishva Vishuta Chaitanya Saraswata Matotamam Stapayitva Gurun Gora Radha Govinda Vigraham Prakashayate Chatmanam Seva Samsiddhi Vigraha Gaura Shirupa Siddhanta Divya Dada Dharam Gurum śrī-bhaktirakṣakam Devam śrīdharam pranamamyaham. In Sri Navadvip Dham, which is non-different from the holy abode of Sri Vrindavan, His Divine Grace established the world-renowned Śrī-chaitanya-Saraswat Mat at Sri Koladvip, the self-same hidden Govardhan hill, Gupta Govardhan, which is the sacred place where all offenses are absolved, Aparad Bhanjan Pat. There he revealed the beautiful devotional service of the worshipful deities, Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharva Govinda Sundar, divinely manifesting his very self as the deity of service and perfection. Eternally do I offer my obeisances unto the holy lotus feet of my divine master, Śrīla Bhakti Rakṣak Śrīdhar Dev-Goswāmī Mahārāj, who carries the divine current of Śrīla Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, coming in the line of Sri Rupa, the object of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu's divine affection. And so finally, and our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Mahārāj, he was an instrument of this, right? Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj's divine vision and conception, it became manifest in a physical form, in the form of the beautiful Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat. So his ideal and the ideals of our lineage, they are apparent to our own perception. And our Gurudev, as I said, right, he was the instrument of actualizing that in a physical sense. And there's this one, I just want to draw attention, there's this one extraordinary phrase in verse 9, Seva Samsiddhi Vigraha. And this phrase, I heard our Gurudev Srila Govinda Mahārāj explaining it in one talk. It literally translates as something like the deity of service in perfection. I believe that's how it's been put here. So it's quite extraordinary what our Gurudev is saying, that like Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj made this temple, established this service, and which is also like opening a channel of divine grace and opportunity where the sincere souls can come and offer their service and make connection with the higher plane and our lineage of divine guardians. So he revealed this service, but then he left the world. But then what did he do? He himself took on this deity form. This is referring to Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj in Samadhi, right? Because Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj, it's not that he died, right? These great souls do not die. So Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he's now in this state of Samadhi, but he's not sleeping. He's continuing with the seva. So seva samsiddhi vigraha means that Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj in his deity form now, he is continuing with all the service of the mat. That means the service of the deities, the service of the temple, the service of the devotees. Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj himself is actually personally doing this. So what does that mean? That anyone who's engaging in that service, they are an instrument, right, of Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj. So Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj himself is, as the seva samsiddhi vigraha, the deity of service and perfection, is continuing with the service of his divine mission. And all of us who have the fortune to have some level of connection with that mission, we are like instruments of his divine grace, right? It's an extraordinary vision. I mean, this is also, we can say, a unique vision of our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Mahārāj. Srila Govinda Mahārāj's divine vision, the scope of his divine vision is also being revealed here in this extraordinary glorification of Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj. No, and so Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj's mission is still alive, and that service connection is still alive. And there was one talk of our Gurudev where he was saying, you know, just because Guru Mahārāj is left now, that doesn't mean he doesn't care anymore about his his temple, his deities, his devotees, his divine mission. And so we still must continue with that for his pleasure, for his satisfaction. And then there's this concluding line here: Shraddhaya yapaten nityam Praṇati Daśakam muda vishate ragamargeshu sa śrī-gurupādābjaṁ. One who with pure faith happily sings this Praṇati Daśakam every day gains the qualification to serve the Supreme Lord on the path of spontaneous love, Raga Marg, by the grace of the associate servitors of that Srila Gurudev. So that is Sri Praṇati Daśakam by Tridandi Bhikshu Sri Bhakti Sundar Govindasya. Gurudev has signed it in this way. Such a beautiful prayer composition. Very happy that we can together go through this on this very holy day. And what else can I say? We all aspire to be worthy flower offerings of Srila Govinda Mahārāj to be offered at the lotus feet of Srila Bhakti Dev-Goswāmī Mahārāj. And we also pray on this day to Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj that we may be engaged in the service of his beloved Srila Govinda Mahārāj. Jai Srila Bhakti-rakṣak Śrīdhar Dev-Goswāmī Mahārāj Tirobhav Titi Ki Jai. Jai Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswāmī Mahārāj Ki Jai. Jai Maha Mahotsava Ki Jai. All the assembled Vaishnavas Ki Jai. Thank you all for your kind company today on this holy day. Jai Shri Gurudev. Okay. And here.